Welcome everyone, benvenute e benvenuti to the 17th Day of Italian Contemporary Art, which is a worldwide initiative launched over 15 years ago by the Association of Italian Contemporary Art Museums and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We are very happy to continue focusing on contemporary art expression following last year's series on contemporary Italian photography, and also to take the opportunity to explore the interconnections and relations between arts and the reality we have experienced in the last couple of years. I would therefore like to introduce and welcome our guest speakers who will discuss and reflect on performative art practices in times of physical distancing. Mistura Allison, Ms. Marina Cavadini, Asha Iman Veal, and Teresa Silva, who will moderate the conversation. Mistura Allison, independent researcher, curator, art historian for, among others, the National Gallery in Rome, Victoria and Albert Museum, Venice Biennale. Mistura's curatorial practice is fueled by her interest in representing the plurality of contemporary Afro-diasporic visual and oral production, and is the founder of Ashiko, a visually driven platform inspired by Africa and its diaspora. Sorry, there was a little technical problem. Marina Cavadini, also welcome Marina, and thank you for accepting our invitation. As well, I welcome and thank Mistura. Marina is a research-based artist, primarily working with performance, sculpture, and video. Guided by queer and feminist theory and decolonial thinking, she works to foster connections and to undo hierarchies. Marina has exhibited her work in Turin, Roma, currently in Chicago, and cooperated with several institutions in Europe. Thank you again, Marina, and welcome. Asha Iman Veal, welcome and thank you, Asha, for being with us. Is a curator whose work advocates cross-cultural solidarity across communities that are often kept apart by geographic and political distance. She's a Humanity in Action Landecker Democracy Senior Fellow, and she's on the curatorial team at the Museum of Contemporary Photography in Chicago. Thank you, Asha, again, and welcome finally to Teresa Silva, who will moderate this conversation. She's a writer, a curator, and the executive and artistic director of the Chicago Artists Coalition. She has lectured widely at places such as the Artist Communities Alliance National Conference, the School of the Art Institute in Chicago, and Oxbow School of the Art and Artist Residency. She's curated numerous exhibitions at venues like the Chicago Cultural Center, Mana Contemporary, and Expo Chicago. 2019, Teresa was named number 6 at the Art 50 list published by New City for her influence and contributions to working with artists in the city of Chicago. Remind you as usual that this webinar is being recorded and will be soon available on our YouTube channel. And I finally encourage you to contribute to our discussion and conversation by using the Q&A tab at the bottom of the screen. So finally, thank you all again, and I will leave the floor to Teresa, Mistura, Asha, and Marina. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you to the Italian Institute of Chicago. I'm excited about this conversation. As mentioned before, this is being recorded. If you could mute yourself while watching these presentations so that there's no conflict with sound. And as mentioned before, please use the chat function to drop some questions in, and I will address those to the panel at the sort of like probably at about 10 minutes before the hour. So good afternoon and good evening to those who are joining us. So as mentioned, this is a panel discussion about performative art from a distance. So engaging with distance through performative art. This is not necessarily a new topic, but we're in new conditions. We're in a new era, which is the pandemic, and COVID-19 has provoked us to all think about the space of performance in the virtual differently than we have before. So I'm really excited to get started, to hear some of the presentations, and I have some questions for everybody too. So what I'd love to do is kick this off and introduce Marina. If you want to go ahead and give us a little bit of a topic, a presentation, and I think you're going to talk about your work, but also maybe related a little bit to a project that you've been working on with Asha too, which is Raisin. But I will kick it off to you.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm gonna share the screen so you can see a couple of works as I talk. So, and let me know if you can still see it and if you can hear my voice. Yeah, okay. Okay. So in my practice, well, first of all, thank you so much for having me and thank you for this kind of introduction. In my practice, I work with a variety of media. I like to blur boundaries between video and sculpture, but also between sculpture and performance. I often direct tableau vivant, and I design accessories that are carried by performers and placed on their body. Sometimes these props are glued directly on the skin. I can show you maybe later an example of what I mean. And this makes the body part of the work. I'm interested in celebrating the performer's identity, and I am aware of having a huge responsibility because I'm not the person on the stage or in front of the camera. I try to operate locally if I can. By the way, the work you're seeing is titled Les doigts en fleur. Literally, it means the fingers are blooming or the hands are blooming. And it has a lot to do with seduction, pleasure, because I'm very interested in stimulating a sensory experience. So this performance generated a video, the one you're watching right now, where the intimacy of the in-person experience is substituted by a synesthetic relationship between the sound and moving images. I'm gonna exit. Let's see. So, can you see my screen? So this is what I meant before by gluing a prop directly on the skin. This work is titled Odessa, which is the name of the performer. So her identity became like part of the work. And then I wanted to share also the most recent work I made. Okay, can you hear sound? No, but okay, it's okay because I'm gonna just describe. So yeah, as I was saying, this is the most recent work I made. It's titled Beneath Her, and it's currently part of Raising, which is this group show, an amazing exhibition created by Asha Iman Veal. The video came out from a collaboration with Waribocco, which is a scouting agency based in Milan, with the aim of representing and promoting Afro-descendant Italian artists. The video shows a dialogue between Charity Dago, who is the founder of Waribocco, and Derek Dabre, one of the artists she represents. So the man you're seeing right now is Derek. And I can just, so here you see the two of them. So Derek on the left and Charity Dago is the manager. So the whole video is in Italian. There is a music by Derek Dabre, which is a trap song titled You Power, released in 2020. And the title I choose is Beneath Her, which refers to Benita Younger, a character of A Raisin in the Sun, which is a play that inspired the whole exhibition, but probably Asha is going to tell you a little bit more about that. Yeah, and I think that's all for me. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Marina. Thank you so much. Yeah, so that's actually a great segue to Asha, who is the curator of Raisin that's currently on view at 6018 North in Chicago. And Marina and Asha have worked together on this project. So I will hand it off to you, Asha, to talk to us about Raisin.
Thank you so much, Teresa. Thank you so much, Marina. So yes, the exhibition Raisin is on view as part of the Chicago Architecture Biennial, and it is inspired by the Lorraine Hansberry 1959 play, A Raisin in the Sun. So the premise for looking at this as a global production and not thinking about it specifically as an American story came from research maybe 6 years ago and stumbling upon images of Eastern Central European productions in the 1960s of the play. The images I first saw were from a Polish scholar of Black American literature, Katarzyna Jakubiak, where she found archival actually of most of these performances done in blackface at the time. So again, A Raisin in the Sun came out in the United States in 1959. It was the first Broadway play by a Black American woman writer, all Black cast except for one role, which was intentionally white, a Black director. It was this huge thing to happen in 59. And I think upon seeing the blackface, there can be many reactions, many feelings, but the thing that was most present for me was curiosity. If you'll see the dates, again, this was happening in, the early 60s. And I'm thinking, how did this story get from, a based in Chicago story to Broadway, to Poland or, former Czechoslovakia that quickly? So it became kind of an entry in wanting to learn about the global history of the play. Again, not just thinking about the way we're taught it mostly here in America as a very specific story. The play was done in that decade of the 1960s. More than 200 different productions took place. As you'll see in some of these images, this is 200 in Poland specifically, where a lot of the research I first was seeing came from. It was done in professional theater companies. It was done in theater schools. It was done in film and television schools, always with different ways of looking at this story of a Black South Side Chicago family, whose patriarch has passed away and they received $10,000. And at that time, it's a life-changing sum of money. So this is a story that's looking at home and family and fulfilling dreams in lots of different ways. I like thinking about this in thinking about what is it to curate performance, because for the exhibition Raisin, essentially what's happening is that we are making a visual arts exhibition based on a play in a house. It's not performance work in a traditional sense, but how do we translate performance into this exhibition? Maybe a few more images, you can kind of see the history of the original play being done, no longer in blackface, but still globally in Sweden in 2016. A very different context, a different reason for the story. You can see it in China in 2020. Again, a very different context, very different reason. In Sweden, they were looking at some of the issues that the US was looking at in 59 in terms of residential segregation and integration, but different time period. In China, they were thinking about class struggle and family, different time period. South Africa, 2017, thinking, post-apartheid. And the thing that I really love thinking about this performance is, again, a radical Black woman playwright found her excellent work embraced as an arts-based format to encourage dialogues on inclusion and justice across the world. So again, even as COVID has us shutting down, we're meeting virtually, there's still this global dialogue that's happened in the history of the play that we were able to replicate in this exhibition. And I will say it only occurred to me really last weekend that probably, there are about 37 artists who participated. Only half have actually been able to see the exhibition in person. Marina has not seen it in person due to just the travel situation right now. And just wanted to pay homage very briefly to that original cast of A Raisin in the Sun. That is when they made the play in 61, which went around the world. There are many cool movie posters I've seen actually in Italian language and in Italy. Marina and another artist, Alessia, introduced them to me, and it's just very cool to kind of go through the process together. And in just a couple more pictures, I don't want to take too much time, but the story is being told in an exhibition in an old dilapidated mansion in a house. So there are some really obvious performance pieces. We have Kiki King, who's a Chicago-based dancer and choreographer, who has 2 pieces that are video projections on screens of dancing, movement pieces. We have another group, Matters of Gravity, who is primarily from Mexico City and Berlin. They have a piece where they were filming 5 years ago in Russia on an astronaut training vessel, and they made a performance video piece. We have that translated as well in this very cool mirrored room. We have another video from a Berlin-based artist, Nushin Yazdani, from 2017, who's asking, the question of where is home? So Raisin in the Sun being a story about home, this beautiful piece about different people speaking about their homes. And again, you can see this is all done within a house. So, I think that's part of the performative element, a story that takes place in a home being done in a home. There's performative photography, Ziwan Yang, performative photography, Ishil Arabuk. There are amazing sound pieces. You cannot hear the sound in this. Rohan Ayende Smith also looking at Black narratives and abstraction. So again, there were lots of different ways we explored performance through visual media.
Thank you, Asha. Thanks for that history too. I love that. So I will then now turn it over to Mistura to give us a little bit of a presentation. I've got a sneak peek of that video. It looks so good. So I'm excited to hear your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Teresa. Thank you to the Italian Cultural Institute of Chicago and Fabiola. I am so happy to be part of this panel. And I think also it's interesting looking at what it means to curate performance digitally, especially for an art form that requires liveness, and it requires touch, and it requires sort of that actual live audience and, that humanity. So of course, at the very beginning, it was very challenging because it goes beyond I guess Zoom calls and and live streams. It's that actually experiencing a performance in real life. It's something that is still, I'm not convinced we have the answer for it yet. It's something that it's quite difficult to translate. So what we did last year and this year is to shift our focus from output and actually lend a magnifying glass on research and process. So what it means to actually just experiment with different mediums and when you're confined at home, right? And we, as part of, I started this platform called Ashiko, and within it, there is also a research network of artists and thinkers and movers and shakers. And essentially, we ended up sort of organizing a festival specifically looking at performance artists because they're the most underrepresented. And according to a survey that was taken in the UK this year, they were the ones that actually had the most cancellations and 75% of their pay cuts. So, it was important for us to highlight their work. I want to share one of my favorite projects via this artist called Mende, and they sort of looked at just a little bit of background before I share my screen. They wanted to give an ode to stillness through, and specifically digitally. So it's best, you will hear no sound, but it's best enjoyed via headphones in your room in isolation. Those are the conditions that the artist that they ruled out. I will share my screen, hopefully successfully. Yes. Can we all see the screen? Fantastic. I'm gonna put the, because so I just want in that sort of one thing I wanted to bring into the presentation in that spirits of stillness, if we can just enjoy this, and it's quite visually striking. So I would not talk and we can just look at the presentation. So hopefully that's sort of translated as well, but essentially what it meant for many artists, adapting and shape-shifting in an age of pandemic, it just mainly sort of changing what medium they sort of present the work. So for instance, Mutsa's work, their work would have been, you know, a big screen and actually them performing in front of it with an audience. But, you know, one thing that we were forced to rethink in our research is how do we actually embrace stillness, and how is that, you know, how can we support and hold that practice? And essentially, it's obviously not an easy answer, and that's why I'm very excited to be on this panel. But one, it's just to really conclude my very quick presentation, and that very quiet experience that you just had is community, and actually having a network of practitioners, curators, and artists, and actually being in dialogue is what has helped really in terms of producing and developing new work. So thank you.
Thank you, Asha, Marina, and Mistura for your presentations. Very diverse viewpoints, but very thoughtful ones too. As a curator, this also makes me rethink when you're making an exhibition in a space, and how is that space defined, and the contradictions, the challenges, and the opportunities. But I'm actually maybe, because I want us to reflect on what does it mean to make or curate performance, whether it's for the camera, is it supposed to be live? Is it supposed to be time-based in a different way? But maybe what I want to start off with first is understanding the praxis of thinking about and then enacting how this performance is going to happen in the context of an exhibition. So Asha, I wanted to ask about Raisin, because this was also in partnership with the Chicago Architecture Biennial, if my understanding is correct, which was really about something that Mistura, you were talking about, the humanity, getting people to come out and to experience these projects, exhibitions. And my understanding, Asha, is that you were going through the process of putting together this exhibition pre-pandemic. And then, yeah, and so having to shift your thinking while in the process of, you know, curating this in your head, because we always know in your head it's one thing, but when you go to execute it, it's something else. But then the added layer of we're in lockdown and we don't know when we will actually be able to see one another in person again. And that level of intimacy that is wanted to be talked about in Raisin as the play, but Raisin in the home at 6018 North. So I just wanted to hear a little bit about the challenges, but maybe, you know, new opportunities that came about too for some of the performance work that you were thinking about including.
Yeah, absolutely. I would start off maybe just mentioning the potential of intimacy through technology is something I think at this point, maybe many of us are sick of or no longer believing in, but it's the thing that really launched Raisin. So the plans to kind of eventually do this show were in my head brewing in different ways since 2016. And when I had the opportunity to actualize as part of a fellowship, it was already locked down. So all of a sudden I could do this thing, but these were the conditions that were handed to me. And I think I've always been someone that's valued being able to collaborate over space and utilizing that through technology, maybe in a way that even seemed, you know, weird for a while. But all of a sudden, when that's all that we all had, you know, I knew all the artists I wanted to work with. I knew they were literally at home. And I said, hey, will you Zoom with me? Can I pitch you this project? Can we talk? And I think, you know, there were 37 artists, really 37 different conversations that were at least an hour. You know, kind of the same presentation that you all saw was one I did for 30 minutes. Marina can attest, people would show me their work, we'd exchange ideas. You know, sometimes it was a one-time conversation with artists like Marina, Alessia, you know, we were speaking for, I don't know how many times, like we probably met 5 times. I know that you all were meeting separately. And I think the thing, you know, this way that we're kind of, this mode we're forced into now, I don't think about it only as a crisis support. I think about it actually as an amazing tool that people are just now using how, or learning how to use, you know, for its best purposes. So I would say, you know, these collaborations we have, they can be done really, really well through technology. There's also an aspect of Raisin, a public programming series that is happening on the radio. You know, I would have never thought I want to do a radio show if we were doing, you know, in person. And I think it's been successful. You know, we can do in-person programming, maybe 50 people will come. I think there are 50,000 to 100,000 people listening to every episode of the radio. And also it's this, you know, archival, you know, audio that we will have forever. So these things are all gifts. I think it's really just using them. And again, not thinking of them as like a lesser format, but really thinking, how do we make the most of this? And yeah, again, I think, you know, the only shame is that half of the artists couldn't be present. But maybe they will in the future, you know, through different ways. Yeah. They couldn't be physically present. Yeah.
But definitely in that discursive space with you, they were definitely present. And yeah, I just thought that was a really good way to think about how to present the work, because I think when we operate a certain way, we work in this one medium, we kind of got siloed and block off the other ones. And then I think artists do this inherently anyway. They work within the conditions, the parameters that don't allow them to make manifest exactly what they want, but they're clever, they're illusionists, they're really good about working around those sort of those barriers and in many ways bringing the work up to a different and new level too. So I wanted to ask Mistura, because with Ashiko, this is more like a kind of a think tank and research and understanding this moment, and particularly for performance art, because when we think of performance art, initially we think about live performance art and how that is ephemeral. Unless it's being documented, it exists and then it doesn't. So I just wanted to ask about the conversations that you started about this. Like, what does it mean to curate or make art when there's no physical audience there? And what can we do with the opportunities of the tools that are around us? But that different level of collaboration. Asha, you were collaborating with the artists on Raisin. Mistura, you're collaborating with others and thinking about, is there a roadmap that we can develop to make this, because this is going to happen again. This is going to happen again in our lifetime, unfortunately. I don't mean to be the negative person, but it is.
Thank you. I think the very roots of visual art and performance is thinking about it as a way of interpreting the world around us, and that sort of reflection can be done through technology, and we've proven it, you know. And then one, I think Asha also alluded to, one blessing in disguise of, you know, adapting to the new formats is the fact that suddenly we don't have the excuse of access. So what it did actually sort of widen access, where people from all over the world can be in conversation. And honestly, I can't think of a better diasporan dream than that, to actually be in conversation regardless of time zone, regardless of borders, and actually being able to experience the same thing in parallel. And that's what's been exciting in my many conversations to explore, like, how can we keep the momentum, and how can we also shape shift and change the different ways where we can present this work and curate this work or create this work, you know. And actually, you know, having to sit back in your own space, in the comfort of your home or whatever you may be, and experience art. Because at the end of the day, we all know art is a beautiful way of communicating, and communication comes in different forms, whether digital or physical. And the voice of the artist, regardless of the physicality of it, is still in the work. So you can still feel that liveness aspect of it, really, in you know, because, you know, for instance, whether they choose an audiovisual format, there is spoken word. So like Mutz's work, that it was actually a poem. But then it's interesting to me to actually watch him mute for the first time. Of course, I'm a bit biased because I know that poem like the back of my hand, but actually, you know, sink in and absorb the imagery. And it's sort of a nice play on the different senses. And I think the question really is, how do we keep the momentum? And as you said, this condition we're in is here to stay. And I'm excited because there is no answer right now, but then the beauty actually is in the process. So, it's something that we're comfortable in right now, for instance, talking as we're communicating, how is it going to be in 5 months or in a year? There's going to be another tool, right? And so that constant research, that constant, I guess, evolving is what's really interesting and exciting, where we're more focused on the process and the research rather than just the output. So, yeah.
No, that's a good point, because I think in this moment, we've granted ourselves a little bit more leeway. Sometimes in art making or exhibition making, it's so focused on what is the output, but the process is important. And then especially when you're rethinking what you're doing with the project, you have to allow yourself that leeway. And yeah, and to sort of point to this COVID moment is we're not experiencing it together in a space, but through time. And so there is never really something called disconnection. We're still connected in some ways. And so in real time is how we're experiencing this pandemic together. Marina, I wanted to shift to your presentation because I was blown away because the work is so sensual and seductive, and I could feel those like little tentacles and suckers and like the, so I think you have experience and are very expert in performance for a camera, for video, that then can really transport that palpably, that physicality I could feel through the screen, which to me was really successful. And then, so I guess for you in this moment, are you also, because I don't know what you've maybe done before some of these videos, if you've been doing video sculpture for a live performance, or has it been bringing those elements together as video art? And has the pandemic provoked you to think differently now about how, what your methodology is? Or is it something more that's maybe amplified what you've been doing and you're like, this is actually something that makes my work more powerful in the sense that it can be experienced in a more immediate way too? So I know that's a big question, but I'm just wondering too, as a maker in this moment, what has changed for you? You're thinking, I mean, I work with artists all the time. I had artists in the beginning, they were like, I don't even know what it means to make work, period. When we have this existential moment, so.
Yeah, so the first video I played is 2019, so before pandemic, and it was the first video I made, and I made it because the performance, so the piece started as a performance or maybe as a sculpture, in the sense that I made these props and then I did the casting and I looked for people. I tried to create, I think I created this amazing community with which I shared a lot. And it was in a botanical garden, which it was very complicated, and it was just me and the curator. So like two are workers at the beginning of their career. So it was a very challenging project, and we decided to have the performance once and then to have the video, which was supposed to be the documentation, but then it became a piece, like a work. And I played loop during the exhibition, and I started thinking about video as something sculptural. And I just want to, I have a note with me about the idea of time in relation to sculpture, videos, and performance. So during the pandemic, I was following Vidrom, which is this online platform, and they play videos every 2 weeks. And there was one by I'm hoping to pronounce correctly his name, Rier Rizaldi, who is artist and filmmaker, an Indonesian artist and filmmaker. And he was introduced, his video was introduced by Julian Ross. And they had this conversation about time. And so I learned that in Indonesian language, there is no tenses. So there is this different idea of time. And the idea of clocks was brought into the country by the Dutch colonizers. And so before that, there was this idea of rubber time, which means to be always late. And so probably this sentence, this thought made me elaborate this idea of, of the video that I was that I kept staring to during pandemic was also part of the work, and it was very accessible, and I could look at these pieces at night, in the morning, and so yeah. I hope I answer your question, but yeah.
Absolutely. I think that level of accessibility has become much more prominent because of the pandemic, and sitting and you know, looking at consuming for research, for sort of rethinking, looking at, you know, we're always looking at different models too, but just to also have a different experience of was it Mistura? Like, you're sitting in a room by yourself, you know, it should be dark, you know, but you can control that experience too, more so for yourself sitting in front of your computer and looking at these videos. Yeah, I think that's, I mean, to me, and the video that was in Raisin beneath her, what I was actually struck by was the first part of the video with the character walking through public space. And searching for whatever location. And when he gets to the destination, now you're in a home, you're in an intimate space, and he's having a conversation. What I was struck by was the way that he was going through the public space was like with trepidation. He was a little kind of unsure where he was going, kind of looking back. So I don't want to read too much into it, but I'm curious about that, you know, that character's relationship with the public space, you know, and this was, you said, was specifically, what was the person's name? Charity Dago, who had this project about foregrounding Afro-Italians. So I'm wondering a little bit, maybe if that was the way you scripted this or thought through it. What was, you know, what was sort of the impetus for that kind of dis-ease of being in public space?
So yeah, there is a big difference between the two parts. And I also felt, I mean, we all felt that as we were recording. So I was recording with the camera, and actually when we were in the public space, we did that part the day after the dialogue, and I recorded with the phone because we wanted a sort of more how would I say, like, less professional look, and yeah, I would definitely tell that I could feel the structure of the public space, and like people were asking us questions or interacting with us, and it was very difficult to handle that, to handle people as we were doing work. And Wariboko, so the project itself and the space, so the house is meant to be like a safe space. And I agree that there is a different feeling as it was there, like actually being there. but also like in the video, there is a, so it's transported into the work, that sensation. So yeah.
Yeah, and the reason I mentioned this, and I'm going to make a leap here, and this is going to be kind of a thought or question for any of you that want to think about this or respond or reflect on, is the dis-ease that I think being in lockdown and then going back out into public, having that, you know, that kind of reaction, you know, and I can only speak for myself and, you know, peers and that I know that sort of coming out of lockdown or having to come out of the home, there's this dis-ease, you know, a little bit of the thing that was normal is now not normal, and to be on high alert. But I'm also thinking about this global moment for the last year and a half that we have had of racial reckoning and around the world. And I particularly am attracted to the idea of how people now interact in public space, the performance of it, and then also reaction to monuments. And so thinking about those as pieces that have performed, you know, patriarchy, war, violence, and now we're reinserting ourselves in the public space, and there's a usually not a good reaction to whether it's the day-to-day or it's what we're seeing and really analyzing about figures, you know, public figure sculptures, to colonialism, to in the United States, to white supremacy. So what I liked about this talk, why I was attracted to it too, is that it's been provoking me to rethink these sculptures in public. Performance can be a tool for us to tell other stories. And so I know that's a kind of a big leap, but that's where my brain jumped to. So I'm kind of curious if you guys have any reflections on, you know, public space and performance, you know, when we maybe do live again, or do we not? Is it in an empty space? Is it in a public space? You know, are there ideas that you have right now, kind of, you know, gravitating towards that, you know, for the next iteration, when hopefully we come out of Omicron, it'll be safer again, and then maybe we have to go back. So it's a big question, but I'm really trying to reconcile this moment of the pandemic, the health crisis, but then also the social crisis, the racial crisis that we've had.
Teresa, that is a huge question.
I know.
But I think it's been an interesting performance and dance of hyper visibility, but then also invisibility, and then high alertness, but also wanting to, you know, seclude yourself. So it's been a bit of a tira e molla. Now I've lost the ability to speak English. A bit of a tension, right? So that, and it's interesting because we're actually asking this very question currently, and hopefully going to present a body of work, sort of looking at the durational and how much the body can actually take. So as you said, we were isolated for a year and a half, for 18 months. We're still, you know, some of us, you know, are still shielding or not, you know. So we are in spaces that are controlled by us and are familiar to us. So essentially, this is from my own personal curatorial experience. Being in a gallery space, for instance, felt like the very first time trying to recollect my memory, felt like, you know, when you go to a new place that you've not been before, and that experience, so you're sort of trying to gauge and you move differently, you know, and you're more aware of your surroundings, even though this is the same gallery I've been working at for the past 2 years. But all of a sudden you notice people, you notice the different positionalities of things and beings. And so in terms of ideas of how do we move forward, I think, first of all, if there is one thing that this pandemic has taught me, again, is on this question of access. So how do we make sure as curators, practitioners, that everyone in the sense of the word gets to experience the performance or the work the same way that, so in a more equal and in an equal way. So if you're hard of hearing, how do you get to experience this performance? If you're visually impaired, how do you get to experience it? So I think one thing that we're looking through Ashiko as a collective, we're looking to actually explore and really, I guess, heighten is really playing on all 5 senses, or 6, you know, because the third eye is real. Or really playing on all your senses and heightening. So who says that when you go to a gallery space, you must be quiet, even in performance? And then also in in my research currently, I'm really looking at call and response when it comes to performance as well. So we have the artist doing the piece, but you don't have to be quiet when you're experiencing it, like actually engaging with the artist, whether it's a whoop whoop, whether it's a shout, you know, actually being in conversation with the artist. So then you, by gaze, you as the visitor or audience, you're not just objectifying the movement, but you're actually in conversation, you're participating, you're part of the work. And that's what liveness really is. Liveness, again, I reiterate, it's not to be experienced just in its physical sense, but once you are in conversation, truly invested in the work, that's how you create liveness, you know. And it's interesting, this connection as well, it means, you know, it literally means a break from the continuum. So I think what's interesting perhaps is to start adopting modes of research that are more focused on parallel, so they can coexist together. Really, ideally, I want us to be able to go to spaces where, you know, the sense of smell is heightened, your sonic experiences and visual and movement and touch. So really explain, one thing I'm really focused right now is just really playing on all of those senses. And yeah, and, you know, being able to curate an experience where everyone is comfortable to engage, really, I think. But then again, it's a huge question, Teresa, like there is no real answer.
It was a big question, and you know, one that's not really, somebody has to write a dissertation to maybe figure this one out. But I think what I am excited about is, because we are still figuring this out, but performance art for me is the one that feels the most alive. And not just when it's in person or live, but also, you know, video too can also make it come very much alive, like in Marina, the work that you were doing, and also that manifesto to stillness too. Much more feel performance than video. So more about the body and less solely about moving image. So you know, those are the questions I have. I don't know do we have any questions in the chat that I missed? Or does anybody?
May I add one thing to your last question, Teresa?
Yes, absolutely.
I liked what you were asking about this post-lockdown phase, and this is maybe moving more into individual beings versus watched performance, but I wrote in my notes, I feel like there's a dis-ease with interpersonal performance, and also with this public space performance that we've all had to do as individuals, I think in ways that felt very normalized, right? You were talking about like social conditions, you know, racism, sexism, nationalism, all these things, and the ways that we would, I think, perform being okay with the status quo just to survive before, you know, your body was used to it. And, you know, that year, that 18 months of being able to control one's space and the types of energy that was directed at us, I think I'm hearing from a lot of people and myself as well going back out. It's like I'm not able to perform or pretend anymore. I think in the best of ways, you know, now that it's actually drained from the body, it's like, what do we do? Because I think for a lot of people, there's no going back and no desire to go back, at least. So what do we do? How do we stop performing? And how do we keep this truth going through different art forms?
Yeah, we can't pretend that none of this happened, you know, and we're still going through it too. Yeah. Even sort of the benign things like in the everyday, and maybe this will be my last comment, is that how in English, American English, our daily routine is when you see somebody is to ask them, how are you doing? And it's super casual. And that question is no longer casual. It's loaded. And yeah, and it can, you know, really bring out certain senses when you're doing those interpersonal performances. So Do you guys have questions for one another?
I just wanted to say that I'm very excited. A Raisin in the Sun is one of my favorite plays. I actually recently reread it and revisited it, and so the seeing a different adaptation of it is very exciting. Marina, I am so excited to see your work. It looks incredible, and yeah, I wanted to echo Teresa. I actually felt the tentacle, well, I don't know, I'm gonna call them tentacles as well, and it was weird. I literally got goosebumps, and again, that's how visually impactful it was. So it's not really a question, it's just like a round of hype, as I do.
Thank you. I do want to say we do have a question from the audience. So the question, building on this conversation, thank you so much. I'm wondering if you have thinking about the imposition of performativity. So I've been about like, performance is the way. What are some of the impositions?
I guess it's got to do with who, because there is a different when it comes to performance, as opposed to, for instance, moving images, or there is this different power dynamic of, you know, audience and performer. So I guess it's not necessarily, I wouldn't call it an imposition per se, but who is it that gets to talk? So, you know, like the performer commands the stage, so perhaps we can think of that as an imposition, but it's more of how does that get adapted now? Because now that, you know, if you were in a theater space or in a gallery space where that performance is being held, you know, you adjust yourself in a certain way, you know, like you sort of adapt to a certain etiquette that's pre-mandated. But whereas with digital performances or performance that, you know, experienced through the screen, that power dynamic is different, because, you know, you can literally decide, oh, I'm going to pause you, I'm going to come back to it. You know, there is a different experience when it comes to that. So I guess that is a different type of, yeah, I guess the imposition is sort of that change in that dynamic where, you know, the performer is not really necessarily commanding your full attention for the way they, you know, structured it, because you actually, as the viewer, have the power to pause them or fast forward or, you know, or play or stop, whereas you wouldn't be able to do that necessarily live. I hope that answered that question.
I think, I'm not sure. Oh, go ahead, Marina. Go ahead, Marina.
No, it's okay. I'm sure.
Very, very briefly, one of my favorite essays about exhibition making is by Jeff Kipnis, called "Who's Afraid of Gift Wrap Kazoos?" And he has this lovely section where he speaks about exhibitions as theater. He's saying, you know, exhibitions are a stage, and it's perhaps one of the only stages where the audience is also with you on platform. You know, it's that power dynamic is broken and you're all in that space of interpretation together in time. I like thinking about it that way as well. But yeah, Marina, please.
I don't know if this is related to the question, but like I thought of the performers that worked with me. Alessa was also one of them. I thought of the fact that now, as my work is like growing, I would probably it would be more likely that I will work with professional performers, just because it's like a very intense experience. But at the beginning, especially, I worked a lot with people that had no experiences on the stage, and I was wondering about that, because and I also did. I had this experience where I mean, I didn't perform, but I did a sort of modeling for something related to abolishing taboo about sexuality for women. and so it was something very like a strong experience that made me think a lot. And I think beyond my personal experience, there was curiosity of what does it mean to be there and like to feel the heaviness of the structure, and like what can we do with our bodies and identities to make statements. So I don't know if I'm answering to Alessia, but yeah, it's something that came out to me.
No, that's great. And I think inherently in all of what we do, the imposition can be it's both a plus and a challenge, is working with people, you know, and but I think, yeah, I think the, you know, sort of what you were talking about too, about identity and that being presented too. Yeah, very good. Do we have any other questions? Oh, maybe we have another one that popped up. I don't believe so. We don't have any other questions. I think with that, I'm ready to turn it back over. Thank you, Asha, Marina, Mistura. I loved having this conversation. Can't wait to see each other in person.
I know, yes.
Thank you.
So thank you,
Thank you so much.
Teresa. Thank you all. I don't have a question. I probably appreciate very much the conversation, because Asha mentioned the medium she was using even before the pandemic, and it turned out to be very useful, or she worked on them deeper, and I think this is something that will stay. Marina saw her sculpture becoming videos and vice versa, or started feeling videos as a form of plastic art. Mistura developed her third eye, and on a less jokingly way, I mean, you mentioned the reflection on embracing stillness at one time, but also at the same time the need of working on the senses after all this isolation. And I think you all expressed very well how all these things will stay, I suppose, with you, with your art and curatorial practice. And so this was, I think, was a very interesting point to see how we are all been able, you know, probably also to use dramatic times and more difficult times as opportunities, you know, to not just to develop, but to evolve somehow. So this was what made me the observation that this conversation stimulated. So thank you very much to you all. I would like also to thank Fabiola, who has helped us behind the scenes in organizing this webinar. It's been a pleasure to meet Teresa, talk to Asha and Marina. Of course, Mistura as well. And since we are public now, I would like just to announce that we'll be able to meet and see Mistura visiting us in Chicago in April as part of the Expo 2022 Curatorial Exchange. Therefore, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Therefore, thank you all, and have a good weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.